There's been a weird resurgence online of thin is in content and beauty standards, and also an equally, if not more so, strange rise and normalization of fat phobia across the internet, specifically among younger generations, which has got people wondering, is Gen Z over body positivity?
It is borderline radical and at the very least an embodied political statement to be fat, chubby, plus-sized.
Really awesome seeing the message of fat liberation coming from not just fat people's voices. That's something that I know that I and other advocates talk about a lot, is that it is only fat people trying to get fat liberation concepts out there that, hey, it's okay to just be in your body. And I think it's really cool to see fat liberation get some traction.
Hey guys, what's up? Imurgency and welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about a very sensitive topic, and I want to make sure to be as intentional as I can about this conversation because it is so sensitive. And that is a conversation around body image amongst young people, and also the striking correlation between the resurgence of the thin is in sentiments, wanting to be as small and thin as possible, and its correlation to the rampant rise of conservatism amongst not only Gen Z, but amongst the general culture as well. Because as we like to say, as we dissect multiple things in this channel, most things, if not all things, are all related. Now, generally, I'm not one to ever talk about bodies, and honestly, making a video talking about bodies is kind of new and also uncomfortable for me, but I think that it is such an important conversation because I do think that the implications of what is happening right now are serious and can and will affect the lives of many people, especially the youngest and most impressionable of us. So I do think it's important to point out these cultural trends because in case you did not know, we are going back. This has been precedented before. There are some new players in this conversation, but by and large, we've seen how this plays out before and it has not looked the best. And it's time we talk about all that. But before we get there, if you are new and this is your first time seeing my face, hello, I'm Remy, nice to meet you. If you enjoy content like this or general cultural conversations, both pop and like socio, then don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss out on this single video. Also leave a like on this video because it helps out a ton with the YouTube algorithm. You can follow me on all my other socials at Imurgency on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And what else do I normally say? Oh, you can also check out the audio and video version of these videos over on Spotify if that's more your vibe. So check the links for that. But let's get into this conversation. And in order to dive into where we are today, we kind of need to start backwards and talk about where we've been, how far we've come, and how quickly we seem to be moving back. So this little history lesson is going to be taking us back to the lovely mid-90s. Because what happened in the mid-90s, besides the birth and rise of 90s kids? Well, the hair chic thin-is-in movement. Right. In the mid-90s, the term chic came to popularity specifically in the fashion world. It glorified the look of thinness, pale skin, dark circles under the eyes, thigh gaps, and protruding collarbones, but like in a couture and high fashion way. It was oftentimes associated with a more grunge and gritty aesthetic. One of the reasons why colloquially the term chic got its name was because this look often captured the essence of the time when it came to substance use. And while not everyone who was chic necessarily was on these substances, they did the whole presence and elusive factor of these substances being involved and being in these spaces really gave this cool, effortless kind of look to the model that was really popular during that era. The model credited as the original hair chic model was Gia Karanji, who was a user who unfortunately and tragically passed from at 26 in 1986. And when it comes to the whole aesthetic of hair chic and then being very much in, the roots may go further. In embodying withdrawal, objection, and the popularity of hair chic, Mary Rizzo argues that while the trend gained popularity in the 90s, that there were actually two other trends. The first is the substance that lent the style its name, hair, which has long been associated with the urban lower classes, has seen an upsurge in use in the 1990s. What has been most commented upon, however, is the fact that hair newest users are white middle-class youth and young adults. This upsurge has coincided with a boom in the portrayal of use in popular culture, especially in film. Taken together, these images create a trope of the junkie as the ultimate authentic critic who withdraws from society. The second inspiration of chic is the art and fashion photography of the 1970s, characterized by its realistic style and gritty subject matter. In this example, it's sort of that thing where like a substance, a dialect, a trend, or whatever will be condemned and looked down upon when it's used by the working class or low income class, but then when those same things are used by the oftentimes white, middle, and upper class, it's then revered as this next big thing that everyone needs to hop on and something that's super cool and edgy. A Heather Hayes article argues that as a result, thigh gaps, protruding hips, or collarbones, and slim, flat waist became the desirable look, which drove up the rates of eating between 1990 and 1998. The prevalence of EDs in the US increased sharply in the ages of those 15 to 29 and only began to slowly decrease again in 2010. Obviously, there are many factors that lead to the rise and fall of EDs. Like, it's not just this one trend or this one look or this one beauty standard, but at the same time, it is important to understand this is where representation does happen to matter, but not in like the positive uplifting way, in the like, oh, this is the beauty standard, this is what I should be looking like, this is what I should be working towards. If I'm not this, then there's something wrong, sort of form of representation. I guess that would be called misrepresentation, huh? The 90s and early 2000s were not a kind time for diversity of body types, and that's just real. Whether it was in magazines, TV representation, tabloids, blogs, basically any media you can get at, essentially made humiliation rituals, shaming women for anything over but a flat stomach and 0-inch waist. And for the male body standard being like this slim but also lightly muscular frame, I want to say like twink plus. And it's no secret to anyone that the 90s and early 2000s were extremely fatphobic. Like, just for a quick glance for how cutthroat the culture was at the time, these women were considered fat and were made fun of and mocked for it in magazines. But now let's talk about when tides change with the body positivity movement. But before we get fully into the body positivity movement, let's make sure we're all familiar with its roots. At the origin of the body positivity movement lies the fat acceptance movement of the late 1960s. The fat acceptance movement was created to call attention to the discrimination and mistreatment that fat people face in everyday society. It started with a sit-in in Central Park where 500 people came together to protest this discrimination. Together, this group ate, carried signs of protest, burned diet books and photos of model Twiggy, and were visibly, publicly, and loudly fat without being apologetic. And around that same time, a man named Lou Louderback wrote an article for the Saturday Evening Post titled "More People Should Be Fat" in response to the discrimination his wife faced. And this is one of the first public defenses of fatness in the mainstream. In 1969, the National Association to Advocate Fat Acceptance was founded to address bias towards fat people as a civil rights issue. Across the country, and in California, activists started a collective known as Fat Underground, with a more radical form of activism informed by the second wave feminist movement in gay activism in the 70s. This group published the Fat Liberation Manifesto, aligning themselves as allies to other struggles and oppressed groups. We believe that fat people are fully entitled to human respect and recognition. We are angry at the mistreatment by commercial and sexist interests. These have exploited our bodies as objects of ridicule, thereby creating immensely profitable markets, selling the false promise of avoidance of and relief from that ridicule. We see our struggle as allied with the struggle of other oppressed groups against classism, racism, sexism, ageism, capitalism, imperialism, and the like, which is a quote from the manifesto. With that, we now cut with the modern day body positivity movement as we know it from the 2010s. At first, the more modern body positivity movement started online around 2011, which got the conversation at least kicked off on social media. And the point of it all was to love and accept your body. No need to change yourself, no need to put yourself through the ringer to look a certain way, just radical self-acceptance. It really sought out to challenge the standards of beauty. In 2014, hashtag body positivity became mainstream on socials, with more plus-size influencers than ever, content normalizing fat bodies in different spaces, plus-size models in magazines, and it was the year that Jen Baker of The Militant Baker went viral after a takedown of Abercrombie & Fitch for refusing to sell plus-size clothing on the basis that it didn't appeal to the cool kids. And following the fallout of that, the brand promised to produce a larger size range of clothing in that spring of 2014. So some change actually started happening as because of this. But as things began to get better, the conversation shifted a bit. As a lot of movements do when they go mainstream, there were arguments and worries that the body positivity movement was becoming a watered down version of itself to appeal to more people. It seemed that people took the hashtag that sought to normalize different body types and bring awareness to them in visual media begin to shift in a different way. It essentially was the all lives matterification of the body positivity movement. There was actually a really great study done, and if you're interested, you should definitely take a look at the critical exploration of the hashtag body positivity hashtag. But in summary, people went through the hashtag's most recent posts to take a sample and sort them by their differences to analyze. And what they found from their data is that certainly in these data, particularly within the disclosure of body-related journeys, we observe a conspicuous absence of explicit images of Black, Indigenous, persons of color, fat, thick, plus-size people, disabled people, LGBTQIA+, people of aging bodies, or overall representation of non-normative bodies, and a lack of diversity in the types of physical modalities. Instead, they are met with a lot of fitness influencers. Typical white, cis, able-bodied men and women paired along to share their body transformation journey, with the equivalent hashtag wellness journey or hashtag body transformation. Body positivity slowly but surely became synonymous with wanting to change your body for the better. And are we seeing the disconnects? Are we seeing the contradictions here? We posit although others within broader society may yearn for connection and validation through their Instagram posts, this comes with considerable risks. Expressing vulnerability through sharing images, personal stories, and experiences that are not typically celebrated often result in trolling or bullying, bringing with it considerable concomitant mental health and safety implications. Within the posts in our study, white muscular men and thin, lean-toned white women who powerlift freely posted about their body-related journeys of fitness and body acceptance. Which brings up a great question of like, who gets to document their journey? Who has access or the permission to share their personal body-related stories? Because the majority of people that had been posting under that hashtag are white, in shape men and women, and they had been getting positive feedback from it. Whereas if the opposite were to happen, that would not be met with the same positive feedback, which kind of suggests that the movement has been moving and becoming something that it never was. Now it seems like there are more people who don't necessarily see themselves as much in the body positivity movement and have moved more into the body neutrality or fat liberation movement. Now let's talk about then being back in. Unless you've been living under a rock, you may have seen the uptick in the amount of fitness content, Ozempic commentary, or just blatant fat phobia on the internet. Just to have a visual representation of how so back thinness is in, let's take a look at the size distribution of what the last fall-winter fashion collection looked like.
You are not saying something groundbreaking or revolutionary by talking about how proud you are to be a skinny person. Okay? And it's wild to me that in the same breath, a lot of these same people will talk about how they grew up skinny and they were bullied for it, but then also recognize that society treats fat people and plus size people as subhuman. Okay? But when you talk about how proud you are to be thin, you are reminding me of a certain group of people. And I'm not going to say it directly. I'm going to have you read in between the lines a little bit. Actually, if you had any knowledge of the fat acceptance movement, of the body positive movement, you would understand that fat people and plus size people loving and accepting their bodies has always been political. There is a reason that this movement, okay, went alongside with other social justice movements, okay? When people come online and they talk about how they face similar challenges as fat people and yada, 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 it's giving reverse racism, okay? And I'm saying this as a white privileged woman, okay? There are creators who are much more knowledgeable than me. I will link one below, okay? But I need you to understand that there is a power dynamic, all right? There is a power dynamic. And by you recognizing that there is a power dynamic and you being able to understand that society treats you better, but not doing anything about it and also feeding into it, you are the problem. There's a reason why that conservatism and traditional values are on the uptick at the same time that all of this like thin is in, skinny is whatever, they go hand in hand with one another.
And this is the case across the board. We're seeing less plus size representation in media, in shows, in fashion, and just in general. And this is concerning. And I feel like when people say this, people oftentimes think like, why are you romanticizing or why are you encouraging people to not try and be as fit as possible? But I think oftentimes what that argument does fail to acknowledge is that a lot of people have pre-existing conditions and physical fitness looks different on everybody. Like not everyone is going to have the 6-pack, size 0, ultra muscular, and also somehow ultra toned body, despite living a healthy lifestyle. Like it really discounts a lot of other environmental, social, and genetic biological factors that go into somebody's body composition. And I think part of that messaging was like the whole backbone behind the original body positivity movement was like, yeah, sometimes these things can be out of your immediate control, but like you could still love yourself and still see yourself in media and have that be okay. Now it's not so much the case. And I think a lot of this has to do with the rise in conservatism in the country, in the world, and specifically in our generation. We previously talked about how there's a rise in conservatism in Gen Z, and there are about a million videos talking about how the rise of trad wives, the rise of clean girl aesthetics were initial indicators towards us swinging more so to the right. But I think one thing that we don't talk about nearly enough is like fitness content, because that also does have a very right leading swing. And in fact, a recent Netflix show called Adolescence kind of touches on this a little bit. It's like a very minor point when talking about like the alt-right pipeline, but like one character says like they were just trying to find fitness videos and all of a sudden we're being fed content from people like Andrew Tate. Like the pipeline is definitely there because it does prey on people's insecurities. And there's a reason why gym bro / gym cell content feels like that when you watch it, or if it comes across your For You page. There's a reason why it feels kind of conservative, even if the person that is the bodybuilder is not or isn't trying to push that messaging at all. And I think part of it is because the whole concept of like bodybuilding and powerlifting is about creating that physique that embodies true traditional masculinity. And in male circles, essentially revolves around the strength and building the strength and body image of men, which if you go far enough can lead you down some other pipelines through a similar way of thinking.
A few years ago, the body positivity movement was like at its peak. It was all love your body, move your body because you love it, not because you want to shrink it. Food freedom, woohoo! And now we have regressed to thinism. The thin is in movement is rooted in self-discipline and control, which is conservative values at their core. The thin beauty standards are talking about shrinking your body, taking up less space, which are also generally seen as like feminine values because women are meant to be seen and not heard. And this goes beyond fitness, and I've said this before, but we need to be so careful how women talk about jobs and money because being able to have a job and being able to have our own money are very new for women. So by saying I'm literally just a girl is giving rise to these conservative movements as well. But back to fitness, let's talk about how Pilates and bar are marketed towards women. It's tone up, lengthen your muscles, get lean, which are all ways of getting smaller, whereas like go to the gym and lift weights is ways of getting bulkier, aka more masculine, whereas Pilates and bar are being marketed as more feminine because they don't make you bulky. Weightlifting is masculine, whereas you can be a Pilates princess or a bar ballerina. The gender stereotypes are very subtle, but they are very crazy to me. All of this to say that the over feeds are constantly flooded with these tiny size 0 girls doing Pilates, doing weighted yoga, sculpt yoga, hot yoga, whatever, then wearing low-rise jeans and eating 1,000 calories a day, and people are like, oh my god, body goals. And honestly, don't even get me started on low-rise jeans because that's what started all of this.
But on the other hand, in other fitness content, you see a lot of emphasis on self-control and discipline, which oftentimes do fall in line with some of the core tenets of conservatism. In an article by Days, it states that the relationship between pursuing physical superiority and conservative ideology in the West is centuries old. We're all aware of Darwinism, survival of the fittest sentiments, but what's less obvious is that these ideas underpin how the right-wing ideology positions disregarding the marginalized as natural. The line between striving for physical superiority and eugenics is very thin. It's no coincidence that physical training is a key feature in the Mustache Man's youth program, which ultimately aimed to create racially pure Aryan society. Inversely, this ideology even predates 1930s and 40s in the 19th century Britain. The muscular Christianity philosophy took hold, characterized by self-discipline, self-sacrifice, patriarchal duty, nationalism, religious piousness, plus a conflation of aesthetic beauty and improved morality. Inversely, this facilitated the prevailing negative stereotypes of overweight people being lazy, unclean, and sinful. After centuries of media enforcing these messages, it makes sense that young boys and men would equate weakness to worthlessness. So it really shouldn't come as a surprise when we see things like a right-wing administration and a culture trending towards conservatism also have a rise in fitness content trying to have that physical superiority. Like there has historically been fitness content that is not weird, but like with all these factors and how the alt-right pipeline does tend to funnel people in, especially young people in, through like their insecure weak points, which when you're younger, it is like your appearances because you're trying to make yourself attractive and desirable at that age to your peers, that you would fall down that pipeline by thinking like, oh, I need to get the best body possible so I can attract the most blah, 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 going down there. And also if we do want to get into the of it all, Prejudice and Spice has a great video talking about this.
No, this is literally coming up on my For You page.
Okay, so I'm going to say something that is going to piss a ton of you off. But if a lot of you are being honest, that's why you're really here. So there have been a couple of trends, including the toddler tees and the Y2K fashion, that is a very alarming sign. And that is of post-pandemic Now, are we over these pandemics? Absolutely not. There's a new one, actually. And if I talk about it, I will cry. Usually during and after pandemics, there's a huge uptick in obsession over who has a perfect body. Because who survives the pandemic is usually seen as more genetically superior, or extremely invested in their health, and thinness as an indicator of health. This toddler tea trend is disturbing for many reasons. The timing of it is what disturbs me more. Not only because of the pandemics, but because of the economic downturns and recession.
Because recessions and economic hardships are how people get recruited to harmful ideologies. And fatphobia, an obsession with thinness and what is considered healthy bodies, is how they recruit people.
Yeah, so a lot of trends are not just trends. They're like cultural pop quizzes on belonging and who belongs. And at the time when I made that video, the baby tea trend was a thing of buying teas in a baby section or toddler section. And guess who could never fit into one of those? Fat people. Even the Stanley Tumbler trend is very similar. It flexes who can afford one. And to a certain extent, so did the soft life trend, which flexed how much time you have to spend on yourself. All those things are privileges, but flexing access to those things determines who belongs. Trends are not just trends, my darling.
So I hate giving these people airtime, so I'm not going to, but like the Funk and Foot podcast, that's not the actual name, but you're gonna have to read between the lines. That one Funk and Foot guy that was in the Jubilee video recently, but he like used someone's appearance to prescribe qualities and traits to define if someone is good solely based off their physical appearance is nasty work. But it has been and continues to be done by everyday people. Like the quote that we just talked about, people oftentimes conflate physique with character, which is one, dangerous, and two, not necessarily a great indicator all the time. And like I was getting at before, another assumption is that like we all have the same bodily functions and all gain and lose weight in the same way, which is just like not true. Everyone has a different metabolism. People's eating habits, workout habits are not reflective of the way that their bodies look. And shocker, thinness is not an indicator of health. Like assessing someone's health and character based on appearance is just ridiculous. Now, is fitness content inherently conservative? No. However, on women's side, the increase in popularity in things like Pilates, Legree, or other low impact forms of exercise in recent years for leaner and smaller bodies for women does send the message and does seek to uphold beauty standards that women should be leaner in trying to achieve this sort of thinness. Not to mention the spatial politics of physically taking up less space, like women trying to get smaller while men are trying to get bigger. Again, like we're going back to really old stereotypes that did not serve us back then and certainly aren't going to serve us now. So I think it's really important that we keep an eye on this. And then there's a whole conversation around the rise of things like Ozempic and its Ozempic dupes. And honestly, at this point, what hasn't been said about Ozempic? People have talked endlessly about Ozempic and how popular it's become because it has exploded and has been deemed the miracle drug of this generation. And I also understand why people might think twice before they would take it. But I do think it's another example of like society rewarding you for being thinner. Unfortunately, the way that this society has been set up is that you do gain privileges for fitting into what society wants from you and wants you to look like, wants you to behave like. So it's understandable why people would take it for aesthetic reasons. And as long as you're being safe and are well informed of the effects, long-term effects, short-form effects, and believe that that's the best decision for you, I'm never one to judge someone's life choices. Like that's on you. And I love that for you. But what I will speak on is the increased popularity of Ozempic and its wide distribution to pretty much the general public. Really seems like as soon as Ozempic and its other similar drugs hit the market, that people kind of just abandon the body positivity movement. Like when given the option to lose the weight, it seems like culturally we move to like doing that. Like, oh yeah, let's do it. Which again, I understand because of how society treats people. But when we talk about the conversation of like Gen Z being over body positivity, it's just like wild to see how fast to switch up once there was a clear alternative. Moving on to my last point, honestly, is just a quick conversation about and how comfortable the internet's gotten with fatphobia online. It's really gotten rampant in ways that are more sinister and intentionally malicious than others. Let's just get this out the way. Did fatphobia ever really leave the internet discourse or zeitgeist? No, it did not. There were definitely some progressive steps taken forward, but we never really got to where we should have been. But now it really seems like we're okay with taking steps back. And this comes at a time where other things like slurs, like we've talked about in previous videos, and other previously taboo or more so less socially acceptable ways of interacting with each other have become more popular. Fatphobia has also become one of those things where people are just like, okay, well, saying whatever. Like we're really seeing the regression of social issues in real time. Like thinking about some recent trends that have been going on online. We have the AI chubby filter, which again does not sound that deep when you say it out loud, but when you think about the implications and what this means and what the whole thing of like laughing and mocking the chubby filter is saying in terms of beauty standards, especially on an app like TikTok, that is a kid's app first and foremost, let's be real. It's just really telling for where the beauty standards are going and what message you're sending to young people over what is a body type that should be mocked and is okay being mocked and which one is more so coveted. And then the most relevant offender that has crossed the internet in droves is the whole big back trend. And I think there was a little bit of discourse about this when the trend first started, but like now it's kind of just like whatever. But like the fact that we normalize like using the term big back and like being like, oh, I'm baking my back, or like using it as a form of like gym motivation, or like whenever someone's eating a lot of food, or basically anything revolving around like being big, really kind of shows where we are. Because the butt of the joke at the end of the day for both of these trends are being big or being fat is a joke and you don't want to be it. Like that's the message that's coming from these. And while the intention oftentimes when people are saying this is not that, that is what is the narrative that's being reinforced each time you say it. So really it is kind of concerning. Like with the general rise of conservatism that's been going on, the normalization of weight loss, and social media regressing to a place, honestly, I did not think we would see again since the early 2000s. Like it's a wild time online, and honestly, I am concerned for where this is going to lead us. Because like I always say, everything is connected. Just because one or a few communities are being affected that don't directly have to do with you does not mean that eventually the issues are not going to knock directly on your door. So it's important to be vigilant and also be proactive at like combating a lot of these regressive ways of thinking, because they can lead us to some very spooky places. But yeah, y'all, that's all I gotta say for this video. I know that this is a pretty heavy video topic, but I hope you're able to get something out of it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Again, if you're new to the channel, definitely subscribe, leave a like, and follow me on my social media on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, all at Imurgency. Other than that, y'all, I've been Imurgency, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.